Good evening and welcome to the Charter Revision Commission meeting. I'll call the meeting to order and to have the roll taken, please.
Hold on one second here. Commissioner Gonzalez.
We do see him, but I don't know
Still
if
connecting his audio, so we'll indicate he is in the room. Commissioner Minor.
Here.
Commissioner Capello.
Here.
Commissioner Burrup.
Here.
Commissioner Harpy.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. We'll take the pledge. Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll now move to public participation. Any member of the public wishing to speak, please raise your hand, state your name and address. Mr. Mortensen, please.
Rod Mortensen, 17 Fox Lane. First off, I'd like to thank you all for serving on the Charter Revision Committee. Sometimes it's not the most glamorous, or can be a lot of drudgery or minutia you have to look at, but I know it's especially hard on this time of the year when you're driving in on a nice day and your kid's playing Little League or soccer and you drive by the field and you stop for that 1 second and go, gee, would I rather be in a Charter Revision Committee meeting or would I rather be watching baseball? But I think that the residents who know what you do end up appreciating it. I known that this was happening. I've served myself as an ex officio, as Beth has, for mayor on one Charter Revision Committee meeting, a committee, and I think one as a counselor way back when. As you know, I'm not involved in either political party, so none of this is political. At times over my end of my career, I've had praise and or constructive criticism for both parties. So this comes from a point of, it's my own personal opinion, but things that I think are good for the town, I think it's worth speaking up about. There's a few different items on here. One of them was one of the ones that I guess was added, and it probably the biggest item that people have been talking about is the residency rule for town manager. My personal opinion is it's archaic. And if you look back how that came and you follow all the different towns and cities, is where I believe, from my recollection, a lot of this started from, like Hartford, where some of the very large cities were in a lot of trouble financially, every single problem. They didn't want somebody who didn't have quote unquote skin in the game to be a resident of the town. You also have to realize, I think I've served and worked with 5 or 6 town managers. Let's just say you had a town manager, what borders back lane, half a back lane, one side's Wethersfield, the other half is Newington. If the best candidate in the world lived on back lane on the Wethersfield side, what real difference does it make? Does someone think that if you pay whatever, $8, $9, $10, $15,000 in taxes to another town and you were the town manager, that somehow it made you less of a town manager? You know, a town manager should be, he or she should be judged by their knowledge, their performance, their knowledge of government, how they react with people, not necessarily that they live in the town. And let's just say it was a different town and you found what you thought, what the council thought was the best town manager, and they lived 5 towns away and their kids were, they did have children in the school system in whatever town that was, whatever age they might be, elementary, middle school, high school. Is it fair? Then again, is it constitutional to tell somebody where they have to live for their job? Think about that. You're telling them where your kids are going to go to school. You're telling them where you have to live to take the job. And as we all know, over the years, there's been a lot more looking into constitutional rights of people. And I think that it's unconstitutional. Another problem is if you go back as far as say, I'll just say Joe and I do, that there used to be more town managers around. And when you went to look for town managers, there were a lot more people in that specific field. And as we went through those 5 town managers here, it became harder and harder to get a good town manager. All of them moved to Newington. I'm leaving kind of Keith Chapman out of this. He did live in Newington, I know, and he lives in somewhere down along the shore. But that isn't what made any difference to the town of Newington, to the residents, to the staff. We've had great town managers, okay town managers, and everybody has strengths and weaknesses. But is a strength that you live in the town? Stop and think about that. What's the difference if you lived on the left side of back lane or the right side of back lane? If I'm just making that up. So I don't think having to live in the town should be a requirement, should be struck from the charter. And then if you make a town manager, he or she live in the town, what about all your department heads? Should they have skin in the game? We had probably the best town planner, aside from your present town planner, because I've never even met her, and I've never worked with her, but we had a town planner, Ed Meehan, who was not only the best town planner I ever met, he was also probably one of the best employees of the town ever. And if the town said to Ed Meehan, I would almost guarantee you're going to move out of the town. I'm not going to mention the town he lived in, which was quite a ways away. Unless you move here, Newington would have been out one of the best employees they had for his whole career. And that happens with a lot of department heads. They are, most of them, technically on a 24-hour call, but they're not so far away that they can't get here. And I don't remember in any of those town managers when there was ever an issue that the town manager needed to be here and he or she wasn't. Never. Never that I know of. And that goes from everything from when we had an officer who was killed and we had an issue at the town hall here where there was a security issue to even mundane issues. When they needed to be here, they were. Big companies, if you headed Raytheon, I don't know or Pratt & Whitney. Does Pratt & Whitney say to whoever heads the East Hartford, you have to live in East Hartford? I don't think so. And would people not take the job because they were forced to live in a town and their family and their kids and their wives, and they're going to leave their extended family because they're forced to live in the town? I have never seen, what is the advantage that the person lives here? So I think that should be changed in the charter. This one's a little wild, and I don't want to throw this out into the mix. And I know it's not going to happen. It's probably not ever going to be discussed, but it came up with one of those things about the stipend for council. So I can speak to this. Beth can speak to this. Joe can almost speak to this. Well, it's very ironic. I always, after being mayor 3 times and at different times with different town managers and different councils, I always thought that, and some of you may have sat sometime, one of the things that always bothered me was we take an issue, and because you have so many people, every single person has to get, even though it's been said 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, it made the function of government very inefficient, number one. Number two, as mayor, and maybe this has happened to Beth, an issue would come up. We both know, or most of us all know, what the specific powers of the mayor is, but a resident has a problem. They don't want to talk to the town manager. I elected you. They want to talk to you. You're the one responsible. I want you to fix it. Usually you can get that situation solved by, talking to the town manager, or a town manager will call the mayor and say, this person won't take no for an answer. They want to talk to you. So it jumps around. I don't think you could ever pay, and I remember this quote from more than a few people. I would ask people, I'd say, you'd be a great council candidate. Would you ever think of running for office? And they'd go, all the money in the world, make me run for office. Think about it. It's a saying, but there were deep feelings about that. And I would think sometimes, and I know one of the times when I was town mayor with town manager Keith Chapman I said, what if Newington had a strong mayor manager form of government? You know, if you have a bad council, let's say, for whatever reason, and they don't do a good job, they're probably going to get voted out. If you have a bad mayor and doesn't do a good job, he or she is probably going to get voted out. And this goes along with the stipend, and people, I kind of also was very interested in people think, and I'm sure for council people too, they'd say, I'd say, how much do you think you get paid for a mayor? And they'd go, I don't know, 80, 90, 100,000 a year. And I go, no, look in the middle of this. It's a zero. And their next question is, well, why are you doing it then if you're not getting anything out of it? So I don't know where I wrote down a 500 stipend. Maybe I got it off of some information for a council, whatever. To me, that's almost an insult, a slap in the face for the amount of time a person puts in. They're not doing it for the money. They're doing it to help out the town. But as Beth knows, and one of the other issues in that stipend areas, you can be a good counselor and do all your homework and spend all the time, whatever. Same thing goes for a mayor. There's nothing that says you have to be here from 9 to 5, although I'm sure some days Beth is, I know I was. And if you want, and I look back on all the hours I stuck in and I said, I could have done even a better job if I could put more hours in, but it's not a paid full-time position. Maybe someday, I don't even want to get into that can of worms, but maybe someday you might, a charter revision commission could look at it, because everybody knows, both parties will say it gets harder and harder to get candidates, excuse me, to run. So I think if, you know, as a token, you want to give a counselors a stipend or the mayor or whatever, obviously the mayor, he or she usually puts in way more time than a counselor. I don't know, that's open for debate. It's not like somebody's going to get rich off of it. If I could just touch on a couple other quick things, I know I'm taking your time. The amount for referendum items, obviously, you know, like if we're building anything now, if you're going to do an addition on your house now, it's not out of the realm of from a year ago, 2 years ago, to be almost double what it was before. So the amount that you have to increase, it should be sizable enough, because I'm assuming Newington probably wouldn't have another charter revision commission for a few years anyhow, and who knows where this is going. Also, that the language for the development commission should be in alignment with statutes, and it is with some other towns to look at. Those are, I don't think they're controversial, just more housekeeping items. And just to make sure. And that was it. I think the strongest thing I felt about was the town manager requirement. There isn't, there's a gentleman, his name is Al Eelg, who was always considered the, not grandfather, the senior town manager in Connecticut. And just as some town managers I know, they're called back on an interim basis because they can't get anybody. And the idea that a, not worldwide, nationwide search is going to somehow produce you a better town manager, I feel more often than not when I look, I just look at every town and read all their stuff. That's not the case either. So the residency requirement, like I said, I think it's archaic. I think it may even be unconstitutional. And I think more than anything else, it's a disservice to the town. So
Thank you very much, Will.
all right, thank you.
Appreciate your time
Thank you.
and your comments. Any other member of the public wishing to speak? Within Zoom application, raise your hand if you'd like to participate during this public participation portion of the meeting. Calling into Zoom meeting by telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand to be recognized. You *9 when recognized. To speak by telephone, state your name and address for the record.
Unfortunately, no public on with us this evening.
They're all at the ballpark that the mayor was talking about. Or they're at Mortensen's. What am I saying? Good night, Beth.
Take care.
Okay. So no other people, right?
Nope.
Okay.
That's the commission.
Comments by commissioners? Hearing none. Mayor? You got anything
No,
at this point?
thank you.
Discussion of items charged for review by the town council. Did you have a chance to make copies of the packet I left off?
I meant to.
Thank you. I know you're busy.
even took it out of that.
So the public knows we had 13 items that the council wanted us to investigate or look into. I guess investigate would be too harsh a word, look into. And we're coming to a consensus on that. So we've been reviewing that each meeting. The process again is that we are the commission of recommendations. The final word on this will be the public. The council indicates that it's going to go out for referendum for a number of these items. There's just one item, whatever the council finally decides, the public will have an opportunity to vote on the issues discussed here this evening or any evening that we have a meeting. So that's the final voice on it. Our next step here, this is our 5th meeting, by the way, which I think is commendable to all the commissioners for attending and being informative and providing input. That's important. The 5th meeting, and since we were established in late February, I think that's pretty good record to date. They've been very informative meetings. If you have a chance to watch the programming, I would really encourage you to go back to the meetings where we had the financial director as we discussed the referendum threshold and had settled on a percentage rather than just a flat amount that turns out to be 10 years old. And the amount before it was another 10 years old. So you're looking at quite a gap in the economy and how the economy's changed. The other issue that we discussed, which was and is controversial, is the personnel matters in terms of classified employees. That's a battle that goes back to 1994 when Bill Ward was superintendent of schools, unsettled by the labor board. They dismissed it, pretty much said, go figure it out for yourself. Well, it's come back to haunt. People have been dealing with it. And Mr. Chapman has some very strong feelings about how that's moving forward. And so does the Board of Education. The superintendent was here. So that is a 12-page minute, 12 pages of minutes, but I think you'd find it very helpful to your decision-making process on some of these issues. Not that that one in particular is going to make the threshold as we move through the process. And I'll discuss that later on recent events as we go through the commission meetings. So you may want to stay tuned at least before the Yankee game comes on or the Red Sox game to catch a little bit of that, where you can catch it in a repeat fashion of the status of that. So this has been a learning experience, I think, to date for all of us. And I hope that we've gone to enough of the parties involved. If you have any suggestions on that, give us a call or come in and see us. We'd be happy to take your opinions under advisement. All of the opinions and input that you give to us in public participation are recorded in the minutes. And government in general sees those minutes. And the mayor sits in at just about all the meetings with us, so she's aware of exactly where the input is. And we are taking those things under advisement as well. Since again, you're the ultimate decision makers on these referendum changes, which guide the operation of Newington on a regular basis. So having said that, we'll move along through our agenda. The continued discussion of community or commission charges. One thing that's going to be introduced tonight is a part that Mr. Mortensen touched on. And that's a consideration of compensation for the town council. I don't know that we've editorialized it in any fashion at this point, other than from the discussion stage. But this comes from the three of us, the three Republicans, as a suggestion, which were allowed under charter, so the Democrats, and then the commission as a bipartisan whole has the right to add recommendations beyond what the council provides to us. So one of the issues that came up was a discussion of remuneration to the council, compensation to the council. And we found two towns that provide, not many, but two under our structure that provide compensation. Killingly is one. And it's not a lot of money. I think with about $500 in compensation. Then there's a town, Wyndham, Maine, which has a basic structure like ours. They also pay their town council. So it's something to review and think about. And it's not to embarrass any of the town council members or put them under any gun, but you know, it's strictly, it's becoming where it's maturing into a part-time job on a full-time basis. And you can see it with the hours that they put in, and they're willing to put them in, and we commend them for that. But we wonder if it wouldn't make some sense to initiate a compensation program, modest initially, at some reasonable amount, that possibly could come out of a town manager's contingency. We're not looking for any special appropriations for this. And we don't want to reflect anything in our comments for the public to think, wow, look at this, blah, blah, blah. But I can remember when I first got on the council, the fire department didn't get any kind of remuneration or compensation at all. Nothing to carry their benefits. And those guys put their lives at risk on a frequent basis. So the council puts a lot of time in. We want to encourage where we see volunteers starting to get to a low ebb. People are busy with their lives, whether it's the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic, and they're catching up with their own lives, whatever attributes to the lack of volunteerism, or I won't say the lack, but the reduction of volunteerism, the ability of people to want to do it or can do it or have time to do it, that perhaps a modest compensation program would put some light on that. But it's also a financial boost, we hope, to show the appreciation for the time they put in. But we're not looking for a decision on it at this point. I know it's new to some of the members, but we wanted to roll it out this evening to the commission and to the public as a possibility. The second leg of the items, and I know I'm repeating myself, but for those of you listening that haven't had an opportunity to tune in before, beyond the 13 items that I mentioned, is the Development Commission is wanting for some ability to do some additional things, good things for economic development in the town. And as the commission looked through and did some revisions of studies, we found the Connecticut General Statute 7-136. It's been on the books for a number of years. And the Development Commission has a significant amount of work to do if this is adopted. Not work that's going to be costly in any great way, but it'll be work that the talent of the people on the commission can finally exercise that talent in a greater contribution of their talents by getting involved in the statute, which will allow them to do more economic development in terms of research of data, promotion of the town, and show on an annual report to the town council where they think things are economically and their advice on how to move the needle on some adjustments in the grand list. So I think that's a no fault proposition, and that one the commission should consider. And then the third one, not to beat a dead horse, is the town manager residency requirement. To do something about that, either eliminating it altogether or making some adjustment to it. To be quite frank, I fall on the side of the elimination. I think you either have it or you don't have it. I know there are towns and they're worthwhile to talk about it. Some would argue perhaps we could get some several mile limits or whatever that would be, and that's a positive suggestion if you're looking to keep a residency requirement in terms of scope of distance. But to me, that's what it would be. So I think I would yield to trust the council on negotiating the contract with whoever the town manager was, he or she, and to set up a scope of perhaps things like that within the contract. My problem for all this, although I have some business law background, I'm not an attorney, thank God. But, no, God bless attorneys. I love all attorneys. They're good guys and women. But in any event, I digress. I think either you have a contract or you have the charter. And if you have the charter over here and the contract, they're trying to negotiate, would call for something else, and they can't negotiate it for the best candidate. It's very complicated for us to find the best candidate to be town manager. None of these things are panaceas, but I think they should be tried. Some would argue, perhaps we should have a sunset provision on it in the charter, give it a shot, take her out to sea, see how it goes. Maybe for a few years, if it's not working out, the sunset provision rolls in and the council could decide to keep the non-residency requirement or open up the charter for revision to it, or a policy. You wouldn't even need it as a charter item. You could have it as a policy of employment. But on the basis of 0 to 100, I think the charter is clearly important for towns. That's no surprise to anyone. It's a doctrine of how to operate and function. But if you have items in there that aren't productive any longer, that's why you have charter revision commissions. To take a look at them to see if they can be improved or eliminated or retooled. The other item in here, I tried to text this over to everyone. Anthony had suggested under charge 2, we're all in consensus on the 1.5% of general fund appropriations and expenditures. I want to explain that to the public. We're taking a look at obligatory referendum and items. In other words, what's the trigger before the council would get the public involved to consider the expenditure of X number of dollars? And then what would be the certification of that? Well, that would mean the public would go to a special meeting, a special election, or a referendum that the council would call the special public hearing for that purpose. And then the public would make the decision on it. And originally, well, going back 10 years, there was an actual dollar amount in there for around $975,000. That number is every bit of 10 years old or older. And so the council would have to back up to that number and be in excess of that number. And it got harder and harder to work with that. I think with all the economic changes so quickly developing, it's a very tough thing to do with the inflation rate at a little over 18.5%. Hopefully that'll come down soon, but annually that's what it is. So whatever you're going to do with that money's been devalued. There's no measurement for devaluation of those funds. It's not locked to the treasury bill or the STIF account that the state works with, locked on anything. So towns, by larger numbers every month and year have gone to percentages, and that percentage is elastic. So as a general, as a fund balance grows larger, so would that percentage grow larger to make the adjustment. If it decreases, then it would decrease by a rolling percentage. So we think that's important for the voters and for the taxpayers. It's not a genius type change, but it's an important change to the effects of the dollars involved. The other part, we defined what a special appropriation is. We have the town attorney gave us a definition on that because there was, I guess, discussion and differences of opinion on the council and in other chambers within the government, the town government, as to what a special appropriation meant. Now the town manager actually applauded us on that. Well, not actually applauded us, verbally applauded us to to come to that conclusion and agree with the attorney, with the Benny and Kona town attorney on that, and so we were able to move for that. And then as we thought through this thing, that took care of the definition of excess, the excess portion of this provision, but didn't talk about less than or up to or greater than the dollar had been there, 375,000. So we added a component, a new component that would be called standing appropriations. And by statutory, standing appropriations is the authority to spend predetermined dollar amounts in an annual activity. And I think that this would provide the council with a way to manage or feel more comfortable about managing the capital improvement programs that that Chief Chapman put together. This envisions the town manager still establishing those dollars after taking input from all different sources, and it would be approved as it is now by the council during the budget process. But what a standing appropriation would do is, and when Mr. Chapman talked about this, or perhaps the mayor discussed it, improvements of roads throughout the town of Newington, one current council would approve X number of dollars for those roads, and that would go in. And they'd be committed to spending that money over a period of time. Another council could come in and just flip that, say, no, we're not going to do roads, we're going to do fields. Under this provision, that could still happen, but less likely because it would be a standing appropriation that would be funding its way through the process. The money would be allocated there and then funding its way annually on the project that we need to take care of. And what drives this the most is the consideration of a building committee that would be different in formation and breakout of how it would operate, standing building committee that could go to this for a host of different issues that it's going to deal with it if it becomes a reality. And I think it was an Olson's report now. The Owens report that shows all of these dynamics in dollars that are significant that have to be dealt with by the council, which is a hard labor, no doubt. That a standing appropriation, which is used on the state level and in other towns, works out to the greater comfort for the public. But and I know I'm throwing a lot at people listening in, but we can go over this in more detail as we go through it. But I think it'll give us some adjustment on that. And it doesn't affect the definitions, by the way, that the finance director wanted. All of that's in there in terms of verbiage that she was looking for. I have not discussed the particulars of the standing with her, but I left all of the language that she said was really required to her on the other parts of the thing. It can be reviewed by her and then she'd come back to us and give us her input. And for the members of the public that don't know, we also looked at emergency ordinances, which are tied to this, which don't require any of the above. If it's an emergency, the town has the right to move forward and get the emergency under control. And I think that's only common sense. I don't think anybody has an objection to that. The only thing that the commission is offering up is some public input after a reasonable period of time in the form of a public hearing, if possible, be held within 30 days so that they can get, and I think the council would do this anyway, but some councils in the future may neglect to do it or not think to do it, which would give the public an opportunity to see what's going on with it, get to meet with emergency management people and get a sense of the dollars involved. Not that they're going to be able to do anything about the dollars involved, but it's more democratic, I think, in the process under intents and purposes. See if there's another one just quickly here. Well, I think in general, I think there's a consensus on the ones that were provided by the town council on the charges. There will be some differences, I believe, on perhaps the ones above that, the non-charge items. And that's fine, that's healthy. It's good for the commission, good for the public, good for the council. And we'll go through those. I think what I would suggest to the commission, though, tonight is to look forward to a public hearing with the public. And then I think we should do what the council does. I don't think we should vote in advance on the item that we're asking them to come to and speak about. The council doesn't do that. They wait till they get their input, then vote on it. And I think that's a good course to take. Otherwise, you seem like you're presumptuous at least, right?
That would be the correct process as well.
Okay, so that the commission will have a chance to see what the public's gonna say. And then we would vote that on and then go to the town clerk and pass it on to go to the council. And then the council will evaluate it. I think they have 15 days to look at it after we submit it.
They'll actually have a meeting with you directly.
Okay.
They can make recommendations back to you. You'll have 15 days to review those changes. It can come back to the council at that point unless they don't have any changes. At that point, they can schedule their own public hearing, get public comment, and choose how to move forward from that point.
Now, one point I'm a little confused about for meeting the statutes on the process. Is it true that the council could make a decision not to take it to referendum? Any of them?
They could vote not to send any
Okay.
questions, correct?
Okay. All right. Not that, you know, what happened. It could,
It is possible, yes.
it could possibly happen.
And that would be a more than just a simple majority vote in order to do that.
Right. Okay. And then we would be politely asked to leave the room. That would happen after their public hearing?
Once they've accepted your report and it becomes theirs for sending the referendum, you would be taking off the slate and
Okay.
disbanded, correct?
Sounds good. All right. Does any commissioner have any other items they want to introduce as revision commission items? If not, we still have time to do that. I have an open door policy, so feel free to call me or text me or whatever else you want to do in terms of the commission goes. So I think we've accomplished, and I want to pay tribute to the entire commission on this, a lot in terms of where we are with wordage and consensus. And I think, you know, one member said, well, what's the rush? What are you in a rush for? Well, I'm not in a rush. In terms of direction from the chair's standpoint, but I know things come up in an election year. People get busy, meetings get delayed. I'd rather give the council some room in terms of all the other things they're looking at, because they're pretty busy to get this thing, you know, intelligently passed on, that we're all comfortable with what we did. And if we're not comfortable with an item, you know, that we had fair play to get the item resolved or changed or modified. And I would like to have a consensus at a minimum on the 13 items. I'd like to have a bipartisan consensus on that. The other items, if a given commissioner doesn't feel it's in a bipartisan fashion, well, then that would be a decision that they could make. But that would be my goal and effort and the work that I would put into it on a personal basis to try to make it bipartisan all the way down the line, because that's what it should be. It's a bipartisan document that will affect us all over the course of time. So, all right. I think Nancy and I have a problem with the date initially established for the public hearing? Is it the 15th,
17th.
17th? What, did we come up with a date for that?
Have a public hearing scheduled, yeah. Right now, you're simply in discussion and creation of draft language. Once we have that in place, we look to schedule that public hearing date.
Okay. So what do you need from us now? Well, let me ask you this. Let me say this. The format that you sent us.
The block format, correct.
I personally like that.
Yeah.
You okay with that? Okay, Nancy?
Yeah.
Chris, you okay with that? Anthony?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anthony? Did he say yes?
Yeah, he's
He's shaking his head, yep.
Give me the sign language.
I think he's still having audio issues.
Sign language.
It's
for,
intermittent audio issues.
Ah,
Oh,
Sometimes I talk and it doesn't work. Other times I talk and it works. I think I every once in a while, everybody in the room freezes. I'm just letting you know.
Well, we're going to go to a sign language Zoom program. We'll make a fortune. What do you think? No? Okay, leave my Indian tribe friends alone. Okay. So go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off there. On what, you need a consensus on that?
if anybody wants to go ahead with the basic language which has been presented, I will send this out as a document to everybody.
I think, did you see the text I sent you on the revised council overview of replacing individuals?
You know, I haven't reviewed that in
Okay.
detail. No, the replacement, I think it's in here though, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
why don't we go over that now? We originally had language that some of us found a little too strong. And I'm the responsible party for this, for the constructive criticism for that on myself, I guess, maybe Worcestershire, I don't know. But it's always worth listening to other people, you know, can't go wrong that way. So what I did is I modified it down to just unexplained poor attendance. We can jazz that up any way we want to, but, and that the individual would have some appeal process, so that if the person didn't show up at all as a practical matter, which is hard to believe, but say they had serious attendance problems, and the town clerk notified the council that this has been going on at various periods of time, because to go to the mayor's point, she didn't want to deal with somebody who had spoken to, and then they correct their behavior for 3 months, and then they're gone again for 6. So he could go in, the clerk could go in and check that attendance at any time, and if it's running at seriously deficient levels compared to the other members of the committee, then the process of a removal could be initiated by the council, and that person would have an appeal process to either go before you in public or executive session, or if it was a question of something to do with health, personal matter, domestic issue, that person would have an opportunity to meet privately with you and the minority leader, who could make a recommendation. So it's not out to embarrass anybody, it's just, I don't know if that does enough, Mayor, as a practical matter, or we.
Yeah, that certainly addresses the attendance issue, and I appreciate that. The other piece that we had talked about was if someone just doesn't meet the qualifications to be on a committee anymore, that they could just be taken off as well. So I don't know if that could be an additional bullet item within that section, or one more sentence, just, you know, for example, if someone has moved out of town and we know that, this just came up today at our agenda setting meeting, that there's a commission struggling to have quorum. And part of the reason is that at least one member has moved out of the state and we're unable to contact and get a resignation. And so to have to go through a formal process seems a little silly when they don't even meet the qualification beyond the committee any longer. So if there could possibly be consideration for some language to address the qualifications of a committee, that the council could remove someone if they don't no longer meet the
Right.
qualifications. And I'm even thinking of sometimes we have industry standards for commissions. If someone didn't meet that standard anymore, there could be a variety of reasons, but those are the two that come to mind.
Does anybody have an objection to adding, they don't meet the qualifications under the definition that the mayor just?
No objection. I think,
Okay.
we were, again, just wanted to be narrow enough so that it wasn't just wide open. So I
Right.
think you did a good job, Mr. Chair, of scoping it down.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Chris Minor, any problems with that?
No, I'm good with it, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
I'm good as well.
Try it. Anthony?
I'm good as well.
Okay. Nancy?
I'm good too.
So we're good on that.
I would only make a couple of recommendations on this. One, we should define a threshold for the council's action. Standard vote or at least a 2/3 vote. That is something that we should at least address. Is it going to be a simple majority vote and that's enough to remove somebody, or should we have 2/3 of the council itself? So 6 out of the 9 act to make that change. A piece on the recorded by the town clerk, that's actually not something that comes out of my office. It's actually supplied by the town manager's office to each of the commissions to report their attendance back to the town manager and then for supplied to the town
So
council.
it should say town manager's office? Okay, we can make that.
So we have that. Other than that, the language seems pretty clear. If we make some grammatical changes and the procedural change for that, I think it should be good.
I'd like to jump ahead to, well, let me ask you this. Are we any farther ahead or behind on the Parks and Rec issue? You know, because I'll be honest with you, I get different calls and I got one group call me at, they're happier. We just want to leave it where it is at 11 because we'll work it out. And then I get the other, so it's not up to me. I said, it's up to the commission and the council. But I said, you should be passing these conversations on to more than just one person for sure. Can you help us with that, Mayor? Have you heard anything?
I have not heard anything, but I can certainly reach out and try to report back if you'd like.
Yeah, because, I mean,
That came from, I believe Councilor Menke brought that forward as a liaison to that commission, that the commission had that, the
Commissioner
committee had
Woods.
discussed it, correct? Yeah.
Don Woods called me upon his return from vacation several weeks ago, and he was kind of in between, because the 11 they were happy with, it was just a quorum issue that kept popping up, and they thought people could now continue that, the new ones that went on, they were happy with it.
I can say that on the 19th, while I was running around, while we were approving budget and in a break, I was actually down in their meeting to discuss with them what the requirements of a quorum as well as minority representation. So they had a better understanding on it. It did seem at that time like they were looking at not going forward with the change process to either remove the specific language of membership from the charter and creating an ordinance on it, or taking any action at all at this time. But I'm willing to reach out to the superintendent or to the chairman himself, just to get some clarification on that.
So they're gonna stay at the 11?
Stay at the 11 as they currently are.
I hadn't thought about taking it out of the charter so that you can change it if need be.
Well, leaving the reference to it in the charter, similar to as the development commission,
Right.
but the ordinance is created for the membership side of it, the
Mhm.
duty side of it, so that it is a charter
So it's
position.
mandated
but
to have it, but the
Exactly.
creation and formation
Is manageable and
through
amendable.
ordinance, that probably makes a lot of sense, actually.
Well, why don't we work on that right now? So we're saying 11, right? All intents and purposes.
Correct. 11 is the current membership of that
Do you
commission.
need to have language that talks about the majority party and the minority party numbers or not?
No, I would not. The minority representation will specifically manage that unless the council chooses to move forward with more stringent membership. It wouldn't be my recommendation. The request has been made, but it's based upon historical memory, which a lot of times isn't really what most people think it is. Somebody always thinks, oh, it was always a 6-5 board. Sometimes it was, but that was based upon the expiration of terms and who was in power at that time in order to appoint to that commission. Didn't change the fact of what the maximum minority representation could have been based upon either a vacancy or a change.
So they must feel comfortable that they can get 6 people there at least all the time under 11, right? For the quorum? Yeah. Does anybody have any issues with that?
No.
Mr. Minor, Commissioner Minor?
No, I think I'm fine with that.
Anthony?
Can you summarize what we were just talking about? I just want to make sure I understand exactly what, because we went back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts on that one. So currently, our charter specifically calls for an 11-member Parks and Recreation Board. We have some commissions that are in our charter, but we create an ordinance separately to determine what their membership and duties are. That would be the recommendation if we were to move forward with this charge change, to remove specifically in the charter, which I believe it is section 605, indicating specifically the first line. There shall be a board of Parks and Recreation consisting of 11 members, which shall determine the uses of. Really what we're looking to is to make that a general statement, not a specific membership amount, and allowing the council to create a specific ordinance that's relative to the Parks and Recreation Board. They could decide to keep all 11 members and create a 7-member board with 4 alternates. That's a possibility as well. All membership stays, your quorum requirement goes lower, but you have 4 alternates that you could utilize. So there's many options that could happen.
Right.
Okay, thank
Does that make more sense, Anthony?
Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
You okay with that, Anthony?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so that's a consensus. And Mayor, you're comfortable with that?
Yes. Thank you.
The issue that we talked about for the personnel.
Oh, yes.
That
That was charge number 5.
Right. Now, I originally crafted some language for that. But I want to let the commission know as a whole that I had received communication from both sides. Legal communication that has asked us not to put anything together in form of a recommendation because they're both locked and loaded to go to court, to the board, state board, and go through the exercise again. So I would recommend, and I did have a concern about this initially. In fact, if you read the minutes closely, you can see the intent. And well, especially from the town manager side, the language of intent. I think it's unfortunate to come back to this again on a personal basis, because I think, well, I'll just say it, I think we're offering some reasonable language to keep the peace. But they have decided that they're both right, and that I guess they've decided it's winnable on both sides. And there's a union play in all of this as well that got involved, I guess, in the discussions. So it's complicated.
Say the
In
least.
fact, if you look at the minutes, the superintendent of schools admits that one of those people, she's uncertain as to who they report to. So it's a tough situation. And I think probably maybe the only answer is to litigate somewhere, I don't know. But I'm not sure how they're gonna make out with that because that's an entrenched, the certified is entrenched, it has been for years, and then when they change the certifications. Well, the other problem is, if you really get into the woods on this thing, the grass, the weeds, the state told Newington a number of years ago that they have at any time a right to change certification themselves. And unfortunately, someone on the state side changed enabling language for certified non-instructional. And once that happened, then that's where the contract. So I would recommend that we take the advice from both these parties and not offer up anything. Their argument is that we could create an issue which would be favorable or unfavorable to both parties unintentionally.
Kind of too bad, Mr. Chair, since
Yes.
it's all the same party, the town of Newington. So it's a kind of a failure of leadership that we're in that spot.
And obviously, someone or the council as a whole was interested in getting it resolved because they listed it as a charge, or they wouldn't have, right? So, see what happens when you ask us to investigate something. We leave no stone unturned, right, Dan?
Right.
Okay, so we have a consensus on that one, Mr. Clark. Mr. James?
5, no change.
See, the Parks and Rec we talked about, personnel we didn't. Okay, number 6, council organizational meeting. Now, I was bold enough to take the 7 out, the time out, but James informed me that it's traditional to have a start time. Am I quoting you or misquoting you correctly?
It's a good synopsis, yes. What would have to happen if we do take the time directly out of this language is in the ensuing year of the election, we would need to ensure that the council chooses when to set the next council's organization date. So that could be difficult. The 7 o'clock works, or leaving it up to the current council. It could be a majority that are coming back, you never know. But that's always a hard piece to do. It's been 8 o'clock in the charter since 1966.
Yeah.
And every single time we swear in, we go 8 o'clock. Really? Oh, all right, that's right. Yeah, it was that way last time. So, I mean, all of our meetings pretty much start at 7. Our council meetings start at 7 unless there's a public hearing prior. So it's very standard practice to have it begin at 7. So the 8 o'clock just isn't in line with current practice. So I would think the 7 o'clock makes a lot of sense.
We can insert the 7 back in with the consensus of the commission.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Mr. Minor, Commissioner Minor?
I'm good with that, Joe.
Anthony?
7 o'clock.
7 it is. 7 up. 7-11.
We don't go until 11.
You used to play that game in school, 7 up with your head down and your thumbs up.
Was it
Library
really
trustees.
1966? Was that true?
1966 is our first charter, and 8 p.m. is in that charter.
Wow.
I'm
I
just-
wonder
I'm
what
just-
the rationale.
I'm gonna give away my
The
ears.
rationale was people used to go out, they'd get together, have a celebration, and then come back and be sworn in.
Today they call it happy hour.
We do it afterward
We
now.
do a celebration after, so 8 o'clock is late.
We
now.
finished.
It's official.
Library trustees. My recollection is that we were gonna fix this by getting rid of the town.
We did have a discussion about changing the wording town to council as the appointing authority, correct?
Okay. I don't have a problem with that. Commissioner Minor? Changing the portion where it said, was it appointed by
Originally, it said the 6 members of the Board of Trustees of the Lucy Robbins Wells Library, selected by the town, shall have the powers and duties. So we had discussed making that appointed by the town council.
Okay. Mr. Minor, you okay with that?
You don't want to-
Yes.
Okay. Anthony?
Yes.
All right, we have consensus on that. I don't think we should make a recommendation on charge 11, which was to go over residency for the town planner and chief of police, because they already live here. But going forward, it's not broke, don't fix it kind of a thing. We're gonna leave it alone pretty much. Everybody okay with that?
Yes. Yep.
Nancy?
Good.
Commissioner Minor?
Charge 11.
Charge 11. Review residency requirement for town planner and chief of police. I have to say, I thought they were both elegant in their presentations and very informative, the way they laid it out. Which was a tough, I think, position for them. Not tough that they didn't believe in it, but when you're living and working here, like the flip, I thought was pretty ingenious on both their parts in terms of how they really felt. So we appreciate that input. And again, I would encourage the public, it's an open book to you. Have an opportunity. I think you'll find it very interesting reading. Okay, we'll go around the block again. Commissioner Minor? He's doing something else. Anthony? They're all shut down.
No, I'm here.
Oh,
You're
sorry.
You're asking on charge 11 if I'm okay with it?
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, Joe, I'm having problems with my audio.
Okay.
Yeah,
This was
I have
charge
some-
11 to review residency for town planner and chief of police.
yeah, I mean, the only reservation is on the chief of police side more so than the town planner side. I would like to see if James was able to get any information from CCM or wherever regarding residency requirements in those positions.
I do have the request in. Heather Shanti is actually working on that. She didn't think that they'd be able to pull it all together for this meeting, but as soon as I do receive it, I'll send it out to the commission.
All right, Joe, I would like to respectfully reserve on that one until we can try to get some input back.
Okay. James, do you have any idea how long that'll be?
Unfortunately, no. It indicates that they were doing a phone survey as well, but I'm hoping they had something in their archives, but she didn't have any specifics for me.
Because the only phone survey I found is very aged. It was 2002. And it has the verbiage you requested. So whoever asked the question wanted to know about teachers, police officers, and fire chiefs. And then they went through the narrative of, you never quite get what you want to be with them, you know what I mean? The question kind of gets lost in the phone calls, I guess, but they did do their phone calls, the state, the research area there. And they came back with 15 towns that didn't have residency requirements, but they weren't specifically clear, Chris, about the chief. In fact, they didn't use the word chief of police, they said police officers. And then they went into the bargaining units. Of course, state law today, if you're in the bargaining unit, no one can force you into it. But
Right.
they did indicate that didn't apply to superintendents of schools. It didn't apply to town planners and didn't apply to chief of police. The towns have a right to require them to live there if they want to have them live there or make it part of the deal, you know?
Right.
Mr. Chair, could I make a comment about that?
I'm sorry, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I've been listening to the conversation, listening to you and others and Rodney Mortensen today talk a little bit about the residency requirements. But I've kind of come around to the feeling that I think we should remove them from the charter, both for, keep no need for residency for the town planner and for the police chief, and at the same time, remove it for the town manager, because it doesn't stop the council in negotiating with the town manager or negotiating with the new chief of police if they wanted to put it into a contract with that person to live there or whatever they wanted to put in there. And I think that the arguments around, times have changed and, the residency requirements a bit archaic, and do we want to limit the hands of the council of finding the best person for each position? I think that's what we want to do. We want to find the best person. And, if they're not living up to their expectations, well, the council can get rid of them, as they've done in the past, I'm sure. So.
It'll be all in the contract. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you.
Joe, if I could just have one further comment on
Yeah,
that,
Chris, what we can do is,
or you want to leave it, that's fine.
we certainly want to leave it open. So why don't you do that, James? See if you can get that in for our look, see, so Chris can be more comfortable on making a decision. And we'll leave that one where she is right now. I don't have any kind of recommendation on it. We put in as no rec, but I hear you're looking for a different position, but let's get the information that Commissioner Minor requested, and we'll include that in our report. Because the one that I was looking at was age, plus they weren't really specific. You got to guess who they're talking about. I mean, and they didn't do any on town manager, but it was an old report. But thank you for those comments, Kevin. Thank you very much. All right, the audit committee. That was suggested by James, I believe.
In speaking with the finance director, yes.
And so we put together language, some of it's statutory and some of it's borrowed from other towns who have audit committees. And again, I think the particular thing here is to go and be part of the request for proposal process. Some of it is templated to go to Mr. Minor's point the other time we discussed it, but others, just like when you're on a building committee, you get to add to the scope of it and what you want to see in it. And I think the town should have more direct input in that. I'm not suggesting they don't get a review of it, but I think to have members on a committee review those RFPs just like they would on any other committee is important. And to set a time schedule so that they tell the town manager they want to get one issued every 3 years, I think would be reasonable based on how those contracts run. And these would be certified public accounting firms. And I think it should state, and it probably does, experienced in governmental accounting to include audits, compliance, audits, performance audits, investigative audits and compliance, and generally accepted auditing standards. Is important to put that in. I didn't see it anywhere in the charter. The finance director would know that she's looking at these things, but I think it's important to be in the charter as well. If you're going to do it. Let's see. We also have a point here to make recommendations in areas of the town's financial operations with the Board of Education where expanded scope audits or reviews may be appropriate. And that may be an opportunity to work more closely with the board in terms of its own budget without being intrusive into their budget preparations other than to make adjustments to them. I think that's an important task that we could have in there as well. And key for me as an ex-banker is the management letter. There are so many things that get cited in the management letter that may be out of compliance or not being consistently done. And now they don't rise to the level of many misconduct or poor systems, but what they do is they set a bellwether which states that if they're not corrected over a period of time, they could lead to the kind of issues that we'd be concerned about. And this committee would have an opportunity to review that letter. And I think that's important because they're going to bring that to the council's attention. Well, they'll bring it to the finance director, but she'll know about it anyway, but now they'll know about it. I think that's important to look at too. So I would really encourage us to go with, and you still have time to tweak these words if you want, but I think it's important to have that going forward in the charter. Other towns do, mostly all towns do that have it. And it's pretty standard, wouldn't need a lot of adjustment over the years because it's pretty consistent with accounting habits for a number of years. So I'd like to get a consensus on this, Nancy,
Yep, I accept him.
Kevin. Okay, Commissioner Minor?
Yes, Joe, just one quick question. Did we get any input either from the Board of Education or the board side in terms of questions regarding the expansion of audits for them?
No, I was only told by the finance director that they do audit their stuff.
Okay.
Presently, and this language just kind of stipulates expanding the scope if it was required to do so. You could expand the scope into reviews that may be appropriate. Because
Okay,
I think they get shut off, to answer your question, I think they get shut off at the pass to do some things. Now, it's in the charter, so I guess they'd have to cooperate with us, but we would hope they would cooperate with us. I don't see that
Okay.
coming up often, but he does review their stuff now. Was it Blum and Shapiro, yeah?
Yeah, they've changed their name now, but
Yeah, they're getting access now to it.
okay. That's all I had for a question.
All right. Anthony?
Yes, I'm good. I was just,
Okay, so we have a
Excuse me.
consensus on that one.
my question to you as a group, do you simply want to make the reference as, like we discussed with the Parks and Recreation Board, and allow the brunt of the language you've proposed to become an ordinance, which would allow us to, again, make a change when necessary versus opening the charter to correct anything that may be of issue?
I'm flexible on it.
on that aspect-
I'm pro charter because that's what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
just a quick one.
We do want to make sure that the council and finance has the flexibility to change things as necessary that may or may not work under the proposal. Where-
Pacino said in a very famous movie, he's a fan of man.
I'll take the basics of the top part of this and I will work that into our draft working Word document. I'll send that out so that everybody has that as a review. And then we'll put together a draft ordinance that we can present to council as well at the same time.
But you have the consensus that we're gonna move it forward as a recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I can hear somebody saying, when's he gonna get to it? When's he gonna get to it? Town council compensation. There are some towns doing this. It's pretty modest. And I'd like
Pardon me
to
one
get
second.
your feelings on that. Commissioner Minor, how do you feel about compensation to the town council in general?
Honestly, Joe, I don't. I would be more curious to see if we have any more basis within the state of counselors with their compensation with our same structure of government before I'd want to make a move towards that.
Okay.
Instead of a compensation, are other towns doing maybe a tax break for?
That's a good thought.
I can speak at least partly to that I know that in years past, the first compensation the fire department excitement over time, the IRS determined that that was compensation that was not being appropriately taxed and basically pulled that. I don't know if the abatement structure is still allowed or not. That would definitely be a James question on a statute.
Yeah, that one I'd have to take a look at. I'd actually speak with our assessor on that as well to see if there's any standing out there for that.
Okay. I would say the only town that I found to be candid is Killingly in Connecticut. I might have missed one or two, but I don't know if you are aware, James, of any other municipalities that compensate.
Really, the compensation comes down to the type of government that it is. So I'll say in Vernon, our mayor form of government is an administrator, and that mayor is actually paid actually about $40,000 a year based upon it's a strong mayor, weak administrator form of government versus manager.
Right.
So it's going to vary throughout the state. So even if we do a survey on it, I can't say how valid it's going to be to all formats that we're looking at. It's going to be
Right.
multiple different formats right across the board. Selectmen, council, whatever they put together, board of director. Manchester is popular for that.
How about if we sent this up without a recommendation, but some category that we could make the council aware that we've discussed it and looked into it for their consideration? I mean, I know it would be hard for them to do it because they'd be the benefactors of it, but I personally believe in it. Again, I would agree with Commissioner Minor. You're probably not going to find a lot of people doing it. I know in the charter, it allows for some of their personal expenses associated with your work to be submitted, or that's not true either, like.
I do believe there is ability for compensation for duties under the
It's
elections.
not anything any of us have ever done,
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
so.
I believe that, believe me.
I'm starting to calculate in my head.
The commission just submitted its last gasoline bill to you. We know you threw that out.
I was just reading, there is a general statute that allows for compensation of officials. So I'm
Yes.
not sure what that looks like.
So section 414 of the charter allows for serving without compensation, but shall be entitled to reimbursement of their legitimate expenses incurred in the performance of their official duties with the approval of the council. So we do have the ability to reimburse, but we would have to look at changing section 414.
Mhm.
If you chose that
In terms of,
recommendation.
compensation clause. Yeah.
I guess, yeah, that's hard to figure out what would qualify as a,
Well, the finance department would make the determination on the qualifier on that. And if you were to make that recommendation, I would recommend that it go into effect upon the seating of the next council. That way it doesn't affect your current council directly.
I think it's something to look into. It definitely would open the doors to more people getting involved.
Mr. Chair, I definitely would like to hear the answer to Commissioner Minor's question, which is, how many councils are getting any kind of stipend out there or pay? And then, I haven't thought about it long enough to form an opinion since I just heard about it tonight. So, and to the issue of, to get more people to participate in local government, I don't know. I don't know if there's evidence around the effectiveness of $500.
Well, I'm not defending that number. I'm just saying that's what Killingly is doing, getting away with it, I guess. But I think there should be some opportunity for the voters to vote up or down on this thing. I think it's like the residency requirement, town manager, the voters decide. This, my strongest position on this, voters should have an opportunity to vote on very specific and important issues. Certainly the residency thing is an important issue. And I think an opportunity for council to be innovative of first to the show rather than 11th or 50th or not at all to the show on a compensation package that makes sense. Again, when I was first on the council, firefighters here didn't get anything. Didn't get any kind of little step in, they didn't get anything. And then under Dominic Mazzacoli, he said, you know, this isn't appropriate. We should be giving them something. Never mind the risk involved every day for them, but just a thought. Well, we'll hold that in the back. Think about it, and maybe we'll get some.
We got a survey out to
Yeah, I don't think
CCM
it's gonna
for this.
be favorable to it. I mean, I just don't think, I'm being completely candid. I didn't think to base it on comparison towns with this because it was going nowhere. It's just a concept that I've thought about for quite a while and think it's just appropriate. I think the time's appropriate. You have the people sitting there for hours and hours and hours and hours, and a number of them have to get up and go to work the next day. And I mean, you go out to get a volunteer. Just think about this commission alone, that the town committees had to, it was difficult, and difficult for town committees to find people to run for council or board of it. And I'm not taking shots at those people that refuse to volunteer. They have their own lives that don't have an interest in it. But, and I'm not saying that any kind of modest compensation that we could afford or we find appropriate or that or the council finds appropriate, it's going to be an inducement, but as my great-great-grandfather would say, better than a stick in the eye, you know? So, whatever he meant by that, I don't know, but.
I would love to hear the voters as they approach. I would love to be at the polling stations, I think, when the voters read the questions, if that is a question. I think we'd be surprised to see that most people don't realize that we're unpaid. And I think Mayor Mortensen mentioned that earlier in his comments, but oftentimes people will say to me, oh my gosh, the hours you put in, gosh, that your salary can't be worth it. And I look at them and I say, what salary? And most people are surprised that not just myself, but counselors are not paid at all. So it would be interesting to see what the public thought of that. But I agree with Counselor Minor, actually. It would be good information to just see where other towns are at on it. And Nancy, I think you posed a good question. There are lots of incentives through tax breaks or stipend exemptions or that kind of thing. And I'm wondering if we do a survey, if that would even show up, depending upon how the question is asked of other towns too, because there may be different ways that different towns handle it. It may not be a true stipend. It may be more of a tax incentive or something like that. So that may be difficult to find out realistically, like you had mentioned.
Can we jump over this thing, and would it be appropriate to have somebody from the town just do a survey? And any administrative person call and say, do you pay your council? What would be wrong with that, other than?
I'll always say the answer to that was going to be, I don't think we're going to have an administrative staff person that could take the free time from the day at this point to be able to call all 169 towns. It's unfortunate to say.
Call all 169. I think we got to do a representative polling. Some percentage that we would consider representative, because the lists are printed of who our form of government emulates. We have a printout on that from the state, and my good pile of paperwork here, I'm sure you have it. And even if it was like calling the clerk or whoever, what department would be comfortable, rather than, because if we don't get it, then the individual that wanted it doesn't have it, so he's not comfortable making a decision. And I can understand that, but I think we could jump over that if we could find a different way of making the phone calls.
So let me see what I can do. There's a possibility.
Weisenheimer here.
I don't mean me. There's a possibility that it may be information that can be gained from the assessor's office. I believe they actually have a listserv that they can utilize.
Okay.
And they may be able to say if they are applying anything as a tax break for counselors in general. They may have a coding specifically in their system. So let me see if I can speak with her in the morning. Possibly I can get some information.
And, like I said, representative percentage, like all polls aren't omnipotent. They take a representative percentage and
Right.
sampling. Sometimes you wonder if it's but.
It'll be who we can get back. That'll what it'll be.
Exactly. And I think that would give Mr. Minor well, at least he'd have that knowledge in his pocket. But I'm gonna predict you're not gonna see much. I can tell you right now, I don't even need for you to call me because I can tell you. It's not gonna happen. I think it's an important thing to do, be innovative for us and get people to the polls to vote.
I would suggest too, if you need the use of staff, to just run it through the town manager. He would be
Right.
the best one to ask in terms of utilizing staff time for.
Yeah, because you could accumulate the other information too, on the police chiefs, how many live. If you just say the assessors have that kind of information, and whatever you think is a representative polling percentage.
If able to go out in general.
But not 169, I don't think that would accomplish much.
And
But-
are there some towns that have, I think there are, the mayor is the town manager and that
Some are.
the town.
Strong
Yeah,
mayor.
that's a strong mayor government.
Mhm.
Yeah, a good example. Yeah, a good example of that would be a little bit larger of a size is East Hartford. He has a strong mayor forum. And their mayor as well as their town council are compensated. Off the top of my head, I think compensation for the counselors are $4,000 to $5,000, I believe. And
It's
then
like Hartford, right, Chris?
yeah, in that rough area. But again, smaller size, closer to us at 30,000. I can't think of anybody that I've heard, but I'm sure they may be there in some form or another.
Because I have the list here if you want it. It starts off with Avon, goes to Windsor. It indicates the legislative body type. And also breaks down whether they have town representative meetings. The public has to approve their budget. So there's that little switch off. And then they have selectmen. You want this?
I can scan that and move it out to everybody.
That might expedite your calling. Yeah. But I can tell you, it's not gonna be, if you're a lawyer in the courtroom, you're not gonna win on that polling because it's not gonna be favorable, but that's fine. Let's see, what did I miss here? Okay, we come back, I think we got through all of these on pretty much consensus basis. You're moving forward towards a public meeting. And then if we need to vote on these that evening, are you planning to put it in the format that you suggested? Okay.
I'm going to integrate this directly into our draft charter language itself, so you'll be able to see the current language and the approved or recommended language, I should say.
I do believe we have a consensus on the town manager residency requirement based on the conversations here this evening. With the exception perhaps of one commissioner, which is fine. So that'll go up as an outside of council charge item. And the Development Commission is an outside of council charge item. That's one of ours. I think everything else we covered pretty tightly. The compensation issue we'll leave alone. I mean, that might be just a footnote. If the commission is more comfortable with that, we could do a footnote to the council that we looked at that section, which we have a right to do.
And you'll have that conversation with them as well.
Right.
When we put forward the recommendation to them,
Yeah,
that conversation can be
and
discussed.
that piece of it came up.
Correct.
Okay, that's fair.
Did you want to discuss charge one? Get a consensus to that.
Yeah, that language is statutory language. To have it mandated to go 10-year in review, which is not in the charter presently. So the part that we're discussing is how often we should do charter reviews and should we require it in the charter to do them at certain periods of time. I think the consensus was that we should have a mandated situation in there so that the council, I think most councils probably pay attention to the 10-year thing anyway, don't they? But this would, no? Okay, so this strengthens the argument for having it in the
Yeah, I
charter.
don't think there is any statutory language around that.
Yeah.
This was just something that the council recognized that, dependent upon the political climate at the time, charter revision can sometimes become a more political loaded event, and we didn't want that to be the case. This is our constitution of our town, is the way I look at it, and we wanted to try and remove that political aspect to it. So whoever's in power at 10 years, that's just, it is what it is. It's a matter of regular business. Create the commission, move it on forward. So it would take some of that political piece out of it and make it more of a just a mandated piece. Yeah, to make sure that we are reviewing that and making sure we're up to date every 10 years.
All right, unless the town clerk wants to do otherwise, here's the proposed language. We have proposed language 10 years following the adoption of these amendments, and every 10 years thereafter, unless the council requested sooner, the council shall appoint a commission whose duty it shall be to review the existing charter, and make such recommendations as it may see fit for revision. The charter shall be amended in a manner prescribed by law. All right, sir.
Will work pretty well. I'll add in the citations directly to the statute. We'll get that language put in there specifically.
So I think we pretty much tackled them.
Consensus of everyone?
Oh, yes, a consensus on that.
I know we're on the same page right now, but.
You kept nodding your head.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, Nancy.
Sounds good.
Commissioner Minor,
No objections, that's fine.
Anthony.
Sounds good to me.
All right, boss.
We'll utilize the language as we've got. I'll make some amendments and changes to it, just generally, just to make it flow properly for them. And then we'll put that together as a draft document. We'll get that sent out to everybody to be able to review, and we'll have it ready for our next meeting, which would be on the 17th. Unfortunately, we will not be in this room because somebody got it before me. Sorry.
Do the 14th.
17th, I can't do
The 14th is okay?
That's a Saturday.
Oh, it's a Saturday. I knew you wanted that Saturday meeting.
Well, we talked about a
What time is
possibility.
that? Is that 6:30 a.m.?
Yes. Yes, it is. Be up early, make sure that coffee's strong.
All right, well, I hope we get a good turnout, but you never know.
Maybe the 19th would be
The
perfect.
public here.
So wait, though, did you just say, Nancy, you can't make it on the 17th?
17th.
Oh, you're away. Oh, you're working.
Yeah, I can't do the 17th.
So that's a Tuesday. You guys were meeting on Thursdays, weren't you, or
No,
no?
we had a special meeting.
Oh, that was a special meeting. Got it.
What other dates would be available?
Making me have to think which commissions meet when. Let's see, 25th is TPZ, 24th is council. 9th is library. Fire commission's 12th.
I'm looking, you're not looking at a
Yes.
calendar?
I'm not looking at a calendar, sorry. When you've done it for 2.5 years, you just know when they happen. 12th is also EQC, so that wouldn't work as a Thursday. I know we've utilized those before.
19.
19th's a possibility. That's pushing us out a ways. 19th work if we were to reschedule.
I'm in a meeting. I'll call you right back. Okay.
Thursday, the 19th.
That works for me. I'm in a meeting. I'll have to call you right back.
Commissioner Gonzalez, Commissioner Minor, how's the 19th work?
The 19th looks good to me.
Okay.
Fine with me. Anthony?
Yeah, that was Anthony.
Oh, okay.
Chris? Might be in something I heard.
Oh, I thought he said, okay, Chris.
I didn't hear him. Oh, what are we thinking? The 6:30 or the 7 o'clock like last time? Like we did at the end of March or April, sorry.
I'm fine with 6:30 unless that's awkward for other people.
Should be okay.
6:30 is fine.
6:30 is fine on the 19th.
Just looking at my schedule here. I'll make it work. 7 is better, but if everyone's good with 6:30, I'll make it work.
I'm available when you guys need to be.
Gentlemen in the room.
I'm available whenever. So if they want to
I
push to
can do
7.
7.
Yeah, 7's fine.
Chris, can you do 7?
Yeah, that's fine.
Anthony?
You're already unmuted.
Oh, see, I had it backwards. Yes.
Okay, so let's go for that 7. That'll make sure everybody's available.
Perfect. Thank you.
I
So,
like 7, then you can make dinner with the family if you're home.
so motion, second, and acceptance of that change.
Entertain a motion for that change?
Accept.
Make your motion.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right.
Aye. I got it.
19th, I will do a cancellation for the 17th. This will be a special meeting, so we'll need to make sure that we have all items. That's a Thursday. Trouble.
We just talked about it.
The phone's got him frazzled. All right.
All right, so we've accomplished a lot this evening, I believe. Got our consensus in place. And get that information in and think about how we'd like to prompt the, well, I'll leave it alone for now. Public participation.
Unfortunately, nobody has joined us still. I'm sure they're out on YouTube though.
Comments by commissioners? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, please. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Meeting is closed. Thank you.
11.
All right, I'm gonna go eat dinner.
Oh, boy, huh?
Well, good night, everyone.